Hey all my foodie friends, how you doing today? Thanks for stopping by the channel. I'm so glad to see you every time you're here. Today we're going to do a beef vegetable soup, or maybe it's stew. Let's find out. In a 6-liter Dutch oven, I'm adding about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. You can use any oil you like. I just would not use any saturated fats like butter, margarine, or lard. Since we are using beef, it's going to have some of its own saturated fat. You don't need to add more. We're bringing that oil up to temperature. And for this recipe, I'm using stewing beef, but you can certainly use some cut up steaks if you have in the fridge. You can use chicken breast, turkey breast. If you have some lamb chunks, also good. Anything will work in this stew. I'm using stewing beef. It tends to be chuck, which also tends to be a bit tougher. So in order to make this delicious and tender, it needs to be braised for a while. But please use whatever meat that you prefer. This will work with anything. We need to cook that beef in a single layer because we want it to make sure that it's brown. And if you put too much beef at once, it will exude a lot of juice and become kind of gray and insipid looking. We're adding 2 stalks of celery and 1 onion that I've diced. Also using 1 bulb of fennel, including some of the fronds. I tend to use all parts of vegetables other than the roots. The roots can be bitter and not very tasty in a soup or a stew. Also, I tend to use vegetables or fruit that are not peeled because 90% of the nutritional value is right underneath the peel. So if you peel it all off, you're throwing it all away. Look at these carrots. Beautiful orange carrots and purple with yellow cores. Aren't they gorgeous? I've added a couple of carrots and a couple of potatoes. You can find these carrots at your local farmer's market in the fall. They have all kinds of them. A lot of heirloom stuff these days. Beautiful. Also adding 2 cups of turnip. You can also use rutabaga or swede or whatever you call them in your country. I'm also adding about a tablespoon of Worcester sauce. Worcester sauce adds a delicious umami flavor to meat. Add it to your soup or stew and you'll wonder why you never did it before. If you don't like Worcester, you can add a little bit of soy, but be careful of the salt content. I'm adding 1 beef bouillon cube. I'm trying everything I know to add a ton of flavor to this soup or stew. Along with that, I'm adding 1 14-ounce can of diced tomatoes. If you have some tomatoes that you've canned from last year and you need to use them up, this is a great place to use them. I'm adding 1 liter of beef broth. I tend to use unsalted or salt-free broth because some of the other ingredients are salty in nature, and if you keep adding salt to your soup, it's going to be too much. Be careful. Be aware of all the salt you're adding, whether it's hidden or in your salt shaker. You tend to forget about salt that's included in processed products. Now I'm adding a bit of ground sea salt and some freshly ground black pepper. If you want your soup a bit spicy, this would be the time to add some cayenne or a dash of hot sauce. It all will be delicious in this soup. We need to give that a stir. And then we need to bring it up to a boil. Just the look of it now reminds me of how good this soup was. It's absolutely delicious, and if you can make it a couple of days ahead, it tastes even better after sitting in the fridge for a couple of days. All the flavors meld together and it is so yummy. So we brought that up to a boil and you can see there's some foam on the top. We just need to skim that off. It's not good looking and it really doesn't add any flavor to the soup. So just skim that off. You may have to do this a couple of times as it's simmering. You'll end up with a soup that's absolutely clear and looks delicious. That foam comes from the blood in the meat, or sometimes from the seasonings that you add have some chemical ingredients that rise to the top, which is just as well. You don't want them in there. We're going to give that a stir, and we're going to simmer this soup for about 2 hours. We want to make sure that the beef is tender and the veggies are cooked. We don't want anything mushy though, so just be mindful of that and check it every now and then. So after you've had the soup, you've got some leftovers, so now let's make stew with the same stuff. I'm adding a tablespoon of browning. You can use any brand that you like. You can use a bit of dark soy if you like. Be careful of the salt. This adds a delicious brown color. And we're going to thicken it up with some potato starch and water. You can use cornstarch, but then your stew will look clear. You can use flour. If you're allergic to gluten, you can use rice flour, potato flour, arrowroot flour. Any of those will work, and they all make delicious looking gravy. We eat with our eyes, so the more delicious it looks, you can be forgiven if it's not as tasty as it should. That's my trick. But there it is. Doesn't it look gorgeous? You have to bring the starch slurry up to a full rolling boil in order for it to come to its full thickening power. Serve this with a nice green salad, maybe some toasted French baguettes. Absolutely delicious dinner a few days later after you've had the soup. The leftovers are so good. So there you have the soup and the stew from the same ingredients and the same pot. If you like the recipe, I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the channel. Just love to have some more foodies here with me. Thanks for stopping by for some more stew and soup recipes that warm your soul. We'll see you next time.